Here's something I don't think we've fully reckoned with yet. Deconstruction doesn't just end belief. For many people, it exposes grief, guilt, fractured families, and identities that were never allowed to fully form. People are leaving religion after decades, sometimes after an entire lifetime, realizing that what shaped their choices, parenting, and sense of self no longer holds. Deconstruction doesn't just break belief systems, it breaks open lives. People are waking up after 30, 40, maybe even 50 years, realizing the voice they trusted shaped how they loved, how they parented, how they judged, and how they saw themselves. And when they arrive in many post religious spaces, it's not that we don't care, it's that the kind of care this moment requires largely doesn't exist yet. When I say we're not ready, I mean this. Those of us committed to opening eyes have a responsibility that goes beyond critique. Because if we can predict the impact of deconstruction, then we are morally obligated to help people build. Because if we can predict the impact of deconstruction, then we are morally obligated to help build the environments that can actually hold people through it. What's coming isn't just more unbelief, it's a care crisis, and we have to be the ones ready to meet it. Deconstruction is not just an intellectual departure from belief, it is a psychological, sociological, and existential upheaval. As more people leave religion, especially older adults who spent most of their lives inside faith systems, the world is going to need skilled, compassionate, culturally literate caregivers and practitioners who understand the terrain. To explain, I want to highlight 7 areas of impact that often get overlooked. Number one, older deconverts carry a unique burden: guilt, disappointment, and wasted time. For people who spent 40, 50, even 70 years inside a belief system, leaving is not experienced as relief first, it's experienced as grief. Many carry a deep existential sorrow rooted in the feeling that they lived for the wrong thing, followed closely by a more painful realization: there may not be enough time left to rebuild life the way they would have chosen if they'd known earlier. This is often accompanied by identity grief. Who am I if the story that shaped me is gone? And moral injury, the quiet but persistent question of why didn't I see this sooner? This burden is fundamentally different from what younger deconverts face because certainty was not temporary for them, it was promised for life. Their relationships, values, sense of purpose, and community were not adjacent to belief, they were constructed entirely within it. Many also gave decades of service, money, loyalty, and emotional labor to institutions they now understand as harmful or manipulative, which intensifies the sense of loss. For those working with people in this stage of transition, it's critical to understand that this is not simply a change of opinion or worldview. This is late life identity reconstruction layered on top of grief and shame. These individuals do not need arguments, counter apologetics, or encouragement to just move on. They need grief informed, shame aware care that honors what was lost without romanticizing it. And that helps them rebuild meaning without false reassurance or platitudes. Supporting older deconverts well requires practitioners who can sit with regret, hold complexity, and guide people toward a future that still feels worth inhabiting, even when the story they lived by for decades has collapsed. For many older deconverts, grief is only the first layer they encounter. Once the shock of loss settles, a harder question often follows: what did I do while I believed this? Which brings me to my second point in this discussion. Many will have to face the harm they've done to others. For decades, many people acted from a place they believed was righteous, necessary, and even loving. They evangelized out of fear for other souls, enforced rigid moral boundaries around sexuality and gender, upheld purity culture, and prioritized doctrine over empathy because they were taught that obedience mattered more than compassion. Literally, obedience is better than sacrifice. Harmful ideas were repeated to children, partners, coworkers, and communities, not out of malice, but out of certainty. When belief collapses, these actions don't disappear with it. Instead, people are left to confront an unsettling truth. I hurt people because I believed I was doing the right thing. For some, this realization deepens into a painful reckoning, recognizing that they stood on the wrong side of history in moments that mattered, or that they parented from religious fear rather than human wisdom. This isn't simple regret, it's moral reckoning. Those moving through this stage don't need to be crushed by their past, nor absolved without reflection. What they need are spaces where accountability does not equal annihilation, where harm can be named without collapsing into self hatred. Effective support requires frameworks for restorative healing that allow people to integrate responsibility into a new identity grounded in growth, repair, and ethical maturity. Without empathetic guidance, shame often turns inward and becomes paralysis, preventing people from making amends, learning, or becoming the kind of humans they are now capable of being. For many people, moral reckoning doesn't remain abstract for long. It eventually turns toward the relationships that mattered most, especially the ones they were responsible for shaping, which means many will struggle with the harm done to their children. For parents who leave belief systems later in life, this is often the most painful layer to confront. As certainty fades, memories return. Moments of punishment justified as discipline, isolation from so called worldly influences, the use of fear of hell to enforce obedience, the discouragement of curiosity and critical thinking, and the control of a child's sexuality or identity in the name of righteousness. Many parents also recall the pressure they placed on their children to participate in belief rituals long before those children could meaningfully consent. These actions were rarely driven by cruelty, they were driven by fear, obedience, and a sincere belief that this was how love was expressed. The consequences, however, often persist long after the belief has dissolved. Adult children may be distant or estranged, still carrying anger or unresolved trauma into their own lives and relationships. For parents, this can produce a crushing sense of guilt that threatens to collapse into self hatred or emotional shutdown. Supporting people at this stage requires more than reassurance or forgiveness. Professionals must be equipped to facilitate intergenerational healing, guide difficult repair conversations, and help parents take responsibility without being consumed by it. This includes reframing past actions within the context of indoctrination, not to excuse harm or erase its impact, but to understand how it occurred and how different choices can be made now. Doing this well requires training in both religious trauma dynamics and family systems theory, because the goal is not absolution, it's repair, accountability, and the possibility of healthier relationships moving forward. Even when responsibility is taken and repair is attempted, many people discover that something deeper remains unsettled, because the question is no longer just what they did, but who they were allowed to be. Which brings us to our fourth point. Many will wrestle with identity. What was authentically me versus what was the church? Leaving a belief system often shatters the internal boundaries that once felt clear. People begin to realize that what they experienced as an inner voice was often a rehearsed pastoral script, that personal preferences were shaped by cultural conditioning, and that what they called morality was frequently indoctrination enforced through fear and reward. Even intuition becomes suspect, tangled with years of being told that certain feelings were the spirit while others were evidence of weakness or rebellion. As belief dissolves, everyday decisions become sites of uncertainty, and people find themselves asking destabilizing questions. Do I actually believe this, or does it just sound right? Am I setting a healthy boundary, or am I still operating from learned submission? Is this fear grounded in reality, or is it programmed guilt resurfacing? This is not mild confusion or a temporary identity wobble. It's identity reconstruction after long term ideological possession, where the self was shaped under conditions that discouraged autonomy and authenticity. People moving through this stage don't need advice about what to believe next, nor do they need a new set of moral rules to replace the old ones. They need tools for deconditioning, ways to separate internal authority from inherited control. They need support with values clarification that helps them articulate what matters to them without importing another doctrine. Rebuilding identity in this context requires an approach that is both trauma informed and existentially literate, capable of holding ambiguity while guiding people toward a self that is chosen rather than imposed. As people begin to reclaim their inner authority, many encounter a deeper and more unsettling realization. The story that once guaranteed meaning, justice, and a happy ending is no longer there to hold the universe together, which means that many will struggle with a universe without divine order, justice, or guaranteed fairness. For many people, religion did far more than offer moral guidance. It supplied a comprehensive narrative that made life intelligible. It explained suffering, promised cosmic justice, assigned purpose, and assured people that goodness would ultimately be rewarded and harm would be accounted for. Leaving that framework means waking up in a world that no longer offers those guarantees. Instead, people face a morally neutral universe with no divine parent watching over events, no invisible hand correcting injustice, no predetermined plan, and no eternal safety net waiting to make everything right. What replaces certainty is exposure, the realization that fairness is not promised, meaning is not assigned, and outcomes are not pre written. Emotionally, this shift is profound. It marks a transition from seeing oneself as a fallen sinner in need of rescue to understanding oneself as a rising ape in search of a strategy for living well. This is not simply an intellectual adjustment, it's an existential and visceral recalibration of how one relates to suffering, responsibility, and even hope. Supporting people through this stage requires more than reassurance or optimism. Professionals must help individuals develop meaning making skills that are internal rather than externally imposed, and support the construction of human centered frameworks for justice, compassion, and purpose that don't rely on cosmic enforcement. The work here is not to replace one story with another, but to help people embrace a universe that's unscripted yet still rich with possibility, and to move from reliance on cosmic certainty towards strategic agency. Doing this well requires training in existential psychology, philosophy of meaning, and humanistic approaches that take seriously the emotional weight of living without guarantees. Once meaning is no longer assigned from above, many people expect freedom to feel expansive, but instead they encounter a quieter loss, the disappearance of the structures that once organized their lives. And therefore, many will experience social and community displacement after leaving religion. Religion doesn't only offer beliefs, it provides a complete social ecosystem. It gave people built in community, weekly rhythm, roles that conferred relevance, and a dense web of relationships that spanned generations. It created a sense of being expected, prepared for, of having a place where one's presence mattered and one's absence was noticed. When people leave, what often follows is not immediate liberation, but disorientation. The place where they were counted on disappears. Long-standing participation gives way to sudden invisibility. Many experience loneliness even while surrounded by friends because what's missing isn't connection, it's structure. The loss of rhythm, ritual, and social gravity leaves people unmoored, and the purpose that once came from being needed quietly evaporates. This is not merely social loneliness, it's belonging collapse. Responding to this loss requires more than better content, more conversations, or stronger online engagement. Belonging is not optional, it's a core human need, and community displacement cannot be resolved through information alone. People in belief transition need environments, not just explanations. This means those creating post belief spaces must be equipped to design communities with rhythm, ritual, and meaningful roles. They must create pathways for contribution rather than just passive attendance, and replace belief centered belonging with purpose centered belonging. Spaces where people are genuinely needed without being controlled or coerced. Meeting this need requires intentional community architecture, not just therapy, because the absence people feel is not only emotional, it is structural. And for many people, the loss of belonging is compounded by something even more destabilizing. Leaving belief does not happen in a vacuum. It happens inside families, inside cultures, and institutions that often resist that exit, which means that many will face cultural, relational, and institutional tension for leaving religion. Leaving religion frequently triggers consequences that extend far beyond the individual. Family relationships may fracture or become strained. Trust within religious networks can evaporate. Marriages may come under pressure, and workplaces can grow subtly hostile or uncomfortable. In many contexts, people are no longer simply seen as different, they are reframed as rebellious, broken, or lost. These tensions are especially pronounced in highly religious regions, immigrant communities, racialized or ethnic faith traditions, and conservative or fundamentalist cultures where belief is deeply intertwined with identity, belonging, and survival. In these environments, leaving religion is rarely treated as a private or personal decision. It's interpreted as betrayal, moral failure, abandonment of shared identity, or cultural defection. As a result, many people adapt in ways that outsiders often misunderstand. See, these people learn to self censor, compartmentalize, and perform belief to preserve safety. Some live double lives, honest in private, compliant in public, while carrying constant relational risk. This is not paranoia or weakness, it's adaptive survival behavior in systems where honesty can cost people their family, livelihood, housing, or social standing. Recognizing this reality is essential because advising someone to just be honest without understanding the power dynamics involved can expose them to real harm. Supporting people navigating this terrain requires an expanded lens. Deconversion is not only psychological, it is cultural and political, shaped by power, norms, and institutional control. Emerging professionals and support systems must understand that risk assessment in these situations is often rational, not fear driven. Effective care involves helping people navigate disclosure strategically, set boundaries without total isolation, and understand the relational and institutional forces at play. This kind of support requires training in cultural psychology, power and systems theory, religious exit dynamics, and conflict navigation and mediation. Without this depth of understanding, even well intentioned guidance can destabilize lives rather than support them. If there's one thing all of this makes clear, it's that what we're witnessing isn't a crisis of belief. It's a transition in how people learn to live, relate, and make meaning once inherited certainty falls away. Deconstruction is working. People are waking up, but waking up doesn't automatically tell someone how to grieve what they lost, how to repair what was damaged, or how to rebuild a life that still feels worth inhabiting. When we say we're not ready, that's not an accusation, it's a recognition of scale. These needs emerging now are larger, deeper, and more complex than critique alone was ever designed to handle. Truth can open eyes, but care is what helps people stay awake without collapsing under the weight of what they see. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Readiness doesn't mean having all the answers. It means developing the capacity to hold people in transition, to offer spaces where grief isn't rushed, responsibility isn't weaponized, identity isn't replaced with another script, and belonging isn't conditional. It means building environments where meaning is made together, where contribution replaces compliance, and where people are needed without being controlled. This isn't about replacing one belief system with another. It's about maturing beyond the ideas that exposure alone is enough. As more people leave inherited faith structures, the question isn't whether the shift will continue. It will. The real question is whether we will grow into the kind of humans, professionals, and communities capable of supporting what comes next. We don't have to be ready all at once, but we do have to start building. Speaking of building, Bridge City today is a few hundred people across the globe, from Maryland to Malaysia, finding one another through conversations, clubs, and shared spaces as we learn how to live in a new normal together. It's not flashy, it's human. It's people showing up, listening, and practicing what it means to belong without belief. Bridge City tomorrow is something larger. It's hundreds of local campuses spread across the world, creating space not just for deconstructing old stories, but for reconstructing our shared humanity. It's a training ground for humanist practitioners, people equipped to support others through transition, repair, growth, and transformation, while helping build communities rooted in care, responsibility, and possibility. If this vision resonates with you, I'm inviting you to help build it. Your support isn't about sustaining an idea, it's about creating the environments where this kind of care can actually exist. If you'd like to contribute or learn more about Bridge City and the global campus, you can visit the link below. We don't just need better critiques of the world as it was, we need places that help people live well in the world that's coming. As always, thank you for hanging out with me today. Until next time, keep rising.